The top 3 reasons why Vancouver home prices will rise in the long term. Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Vancouver Life Real Estate Podcast. And today we're going to look at why, over the long term, the top 3 reasons why not only will Vancouver prices maintain, they will likely increase in the future. We typically do a lot of week to week to week to week updates on where the marketplace is at, but I felt like there was a need to talk about maybe a much longer term projection and what is the city doing and are we growing? Because a lot of people hold their homes for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? So what does the imminent future look like? Dan and I touch on that all the time, but let's take a look at maybe the next 10, the next 20, the next 30 years and what the city is doing to prepare for that. And we've seen some new reports coming out by the city of Vancouver, and there's been some new population forecast changes. And I think it's really important to talk about it because it'll help buyers and sellers decide what to buy over the long term, right? May not come as a huge surprise because with more people means less land. But anyhow, Metro Vancouver has just come out with a new forecast that will project about 3.8 million people living in Vancouver by 2050. This is obviously an increase from the 2.8 million people in 2021. And up from 2.38 million people from 2011. So I guess what we'll look at here is maybe to give it a baseline here, we should probably look at the top G7 countries and see how Canada is looking in terms of the rest of the world. And then we'll get down back into Vancouver. So if we touch on where Canada is at globally compared to the other G7 countries, Canada has roughly 424 homes for every 1,000 people. And this is below the average of roughly 471, right? In order to match today's demand, we need roughly 1.8 million homes. And instead, we're on track for, what is it, Dan? 279,000 this year?
Mm-hmm.
So we are supplying well below the demand, right? And this means that if we decided not to take in any more immigrants for the next 6.5 years, that's how long it would take before we would actually reach equilibrium. So right now, we're roughly at about 2.7 people per home living in Canada. And when you look at 400,000 new immigrants per year, we need roughly 148,000 homes per year to match the demand. Is that about right?
To keep status quo, yes.
Yeah, to keep status quo.
So yeah, I think overall we are going to see sustainability. Obviously, there's fluctuations. I think we're both bullish long-term and very long-term, being 30 plus years here, that we're going to see price appreciation. Very hard to put hard numbers on that, of course, but I think overall we're going to see a continuance of the upward trend. Is that safe to say for both of us here?
Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing that we should mention is that these models also take into account a lot of uncertainties. So it takes into account like another potential pandemic, the COVID-19 sort of issue, or a greater natural disaster kind of issue. It takes into account these big potential changes and outside of a normal year, right? So that's also another point worth mentioning. But yeah, certainly over the long run here, we are going to see price go up. It's impossible with the amount of new people coming in, the amount of property being built, and simply the amount of land that we have. That's just not gonna, I just don't see prices really going anywhere but up, so long as those 3 things maintain the same.
Yeah, I can agree with that. So again, to kind of extrapolate a bit here on Ryan's numbers regarding population, Metro Vancouver, we're targeting all the way out to 2050, 2050 right here. And, we're looking at about 1 million more people in Metro Vancouver over this 29 years. That's 34,000 people per year moving into Metro Vancouver. Based on our current status quo of about that 2.7 people living in every average dwelling, keeping in mind, of course, that the average for G7 is 2.1. But looking at that 2.7, about 12,000 new dwellings are needed every year in Metro Vancouver. For reference, the entire province of BC is currently on track for a record 68,000 homes just this year. So while that sounds good and they are kind of catching up a bit of the lag is quite tremendous, as we touched on earlier. We're quite far behind the rest of the G7. So encouraging to see housing numbers kind of ahead of immigration numbers. But again, we don't know how sustainable that's going to be, and we'll touch on that in a bit. Again, based on the fact that 68,000 new dwellings is an all-time record.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that 8,000 of that will be in Vancouver. Maybe 8,000 will be in Surrey. So that's 60 plus thousand is going to be spread out, right? So, and it's an important distinction, because when you talk about just Vancouver growing by 35,000 people a year, right? It's an important distinction. So
definitely,
you're only looking homes at being built.
Yeah, it's what, 20% of that is going into Metro Vancouver.
Yeah, exactly, right. And Dan and I have talked for a long time that a lot of the planning that we think takes place in here is by design, obviously, and designed to continue to create demand and the growth of asset prices, right? Homeowners are being protected in this model, and that's important to distinct. So, anyhow, if we actually hit 3.8 million people, that would put Vancouver on a comparable size to Seattle and Montreal. So I both cities right now sit around 4 million. That's obviously in 29 years. So I don't know where Montreal and Seattle will be in 29 years, but it'll put us at a current size where they're currently at, right? And another reason why we're going to see, we think, a large influx of people is as political climates change around the world, and specifically in Hong Kong, there's over 300,000 people, Canadians, that reside in Hong Kong, right? And as the political rights as that deteriorates there, and China continues to its intervention into laws and human rights, I think you're going to start to see a lot of those Canadians come home, right? And that's going to add to, I think, Vancouver specific will see a big push there, because I think a lot of those people will come back to the west side of Canada, right? So what is Vancouver doing to prepare for this? Because we know that there's a large growth coming. So what kind of homes are being built? How many is it going to work? And what are going to be the long-term results, right? I think what's really important to note in this particular report is that the future of all new home types, they really center around multifamily. That probably doesn't come as a surprise. But roughly 50% of all new homes over the next few decades will be apartments and then multifamily, followed by townhomes and then single family. And what's really interesting about those is that multifamily will account for about 28% of that 50%. Then you've got townhomes that'll account for about 15%. And then you've got single family homes, which will flatline by about 2030 and only account for 6% of the growth. So I think it's safe to say that if you own a single family home in Vancouver, the chances of it going down in value are extremely low. This is becoming an asset class that people will largely be priced out of in the future. It's already happening now. It's only going to exacerbate going forward. I don't know, Dan, if you want to touch on that, but that's certainly how I feel.
Yeah, no, fully agree. And we're kind of already seeing that happen now in the sense that you look at Vancouver East, I think is a great example where a lot of this region was recently rezoned and densified so that you can build duplexes on what was previously single family homes. That inherently creates an increased value in that property, or at least its highest and best use value potential. So homeowners that, let's say, are sitting on a home that is single family, but it's getting older, they could sell it, and the agent will definitely sell it, noting that, of course, you can have a higher and better usage of that property, or they will put in that second suite, or of course tear down and rebuild that duplex, maybe live in one half, maybe sell off the other, maybe sell off both. Either way, there's more money in it. So if you're sitting on a single family home on a lot and currently it's zoned duplex, but you are happy with your home and have no need to sell, maybe in another 10, 15 years, it's now zoned for a triplex or even a 4-unit building. Again, There's going to be more value there because, you don't have to walk around too much of any area of Vancouver to see single family homes being torn down for multi-unit buildings.
What's that sage old saying? Buy land, they're not making any more of it.
Still true.
Yeah.
Still true.
And on the flip side of that note, I think with 50% of all new homes over the next few decades going to be apartments, conversely, the most affordable entry level for somebody who's maybe a first-time buyer, I think the hopes of your first-time purchase being a townhouse, a duplex, or a single-family home are going to drop dramatically in the coming decades. So definitely look at the highest supply number is going to be apartments, right? So you're going to be able to get likely into an apartment, and then you're going to have to do what many of us in Vancouver have done: start in an apartment, flip to a townhouse, then flip to a half duplex, then flip to a house if you can get to that house, right? And that's if you plan to stay in the city, but that's going to be largely based on affordability and supply, right? And the fact that the growth of single family homes is going to flatline by the late 2030s and then decrease into the 2040s. I mean, that's going to make the values of land and single family just go through the roof, right? I'm actually surprised they're not building more townhomes, as only 15% of that growth. I know the demand for townhomes for the last 4 or 5 months has been the leader. So it's interesting that they're not building more of them, but I guess that's because of the land.
That's it. If you're given a piece of land where you can build 20 units or you can build 8, chances are the developer is going to go for highest and best.
Of course. Yeah. And actually, they actually talk about a particular project that they've actually been doing this kind of, I think it was I'm trying to remember the exact neighborhood here, but it's along Kingsway between sort of 29th to 41st. And what they did was right along Kingsway is they've now rezoned the entire area, right? So the way it works is right down the arterial routes, you're going to see a lot of condos, high-rise condos, and you're also going to see a lot of commercial space. But then it's going to go one block in, you're going to see all the townhouses and duplexes that are going to change. And then inside of that, it's going to stay single family, right? This is, I think, going to be the neighborhood model going forward. So I think down these large arterial streets, you're going to see SkyTrains and very high density. And then it's going to back off as it gets into the neighborhoods, which is very interesting. And it seems to be working right now. That's the other side. But with that being said, so we've talked about population being the number one reason I think that we're going to see prices rise in the future. But then let's talk about the fact that the city continues to have its own issues with choking supply and taking forever to build permits. Dan, do you want to touch on this a little bit?
It's something that we definitely talk about often because it is such an insurmountable, so it feels like, issue here in GVRD. I think, for example, here in Vancouver, the current licensing time and building permit wait time is about 8 to 9 months. And you can just imagine what that's like as a builder who's gone and let's say secured a property or bought land, or even a homeowner looking to, let's say, build a laneway house to help with the housing shortage. And you're not even going to get a formal answer for 8 or 9 months. You can imagine the economic cost of that as well. Let's say you're trying to start a business and it takes 8, 9 months for you to get an approval for your business license. I mean, it's somewhere in the realm of 90 to 100 grand a month that people can potentially lose in revenues based on the fact that they're just being told to sit on the sidelines.
So if you back that off, that's between $25,000 and $30,000 a week that people are paying in terms of delays, in terms of opportunity cost to potential owners. And then you're looking at, if you look at the 8-month hold, that's almost $750,000 that is lost opportunity on waiting to get the revenue going. Which to me, I just don't think like that has to change. And I mean, I know back in 2018, I think the city hired roughly 75 people to deal with the backlog, but they haven't been able to deal with it. So that's not enough yet.
I think what we've uncovered here too, Ryan, in all of our years and in the industry and having our interviews and listening to our colleagues is that this is all the chokehold, the bottleneck is by design. There is a solution and they are not providing it on purpose. And it's literally because you've got 3 levels of government that are controlling housing and access to building more, and of course on the credit side. But talking about the building permit side of things, if the demand outweighs the supply, prices will continue to maintain and go up. And again, this is being done by design. It was largely uncovered by a professor from the Sprott School of Business named Ian Lee. And he's got a lot to say about this. And he's published a lot of articles about it that just say, look, for years and years, government has been basically, their constituents were pleading for density, for building permits to have easier access, et cetera. And they are just being throttled down so that the demand will continue to outweigh it, so that the people who keep them in power are staying wealthy.
Sounds like I've heard of something like that before. It's interesting because, I mean, real estate, when you look at Vancouver the last 44 years, has really gone nowhere but up, right? So when you look deeper at it, and when you start to look at the levels of power and the levels of influence, if this doesn't change, I mean, the cost, like we said, $750,000 wait time is what you're looking at. That's a humongous demand. That's a massive demand. It also shows huge gaps in the economy, right? Where we could be employing more people. But again, done by design to create demand.
Yeah. So they're trying to throttle up population and immigration massively, and yet they are still really holding back on the ability to let people build homes for these people. And then there's a third element that we think is going to be, of course, the third reason why we expect home prices in British Columbia to continue an upward trend over the long term. And that's your access to credit, right? We have the big banks here are consistently changing their policies to make sure that they can supply credit to the average home buyer. And there's a lot of them out there, and there's a lot of competition out there. And I think the biggest the biggest story, the biggest recent headline that really feeds into this narrative is the fact that CMHC, after tightening their policies right at the beginning of the pandemic and the shutdown, they lost something like 50% of their market share. And, they're in business to make money as well. So they have loosened their policies so that they can attract more people to borrow through them. And if that doesn't tell you where the motives are, I don't know what will.
It also it also, this is a bit of a sidebar, but it also goes to show that if you do not do the correct projections and you actually stand by what is not happening in the marketplace, that you will lose your market share and your influence, right? And CMHC has lost a lot of influence over the last few years, due in part to their, following Eric Siddall's advice and his potential forward-looking insights that didn't happen, right? And that's been a big cost to CMHC. Banks, like Dan talked about, they have always competed for your rates, and they will continue to do so. The question is are groups like CMHC and potential B lenders going to become um, more in the game than they already are, right? And I think as they continue to compete for bigger market shares, yeah, I think you're going to see more of that, especially credit unions too.
Totally agree. So there you have it. These are the top 3 reasons why we believe Vancouver home prices will rise over the long term. Funny thing is too, as we've gone through this, Ryan, I'm really realizing this is absolutely nothing new, too, right? Like it's like the circumstances are ever evolving, and there's a lot of new data here, which speaks to it. But you look back, do you remember Expo 86 and trying to attract people here? It's been happening for a long time, and it is still being controlled and governed by all 3 sides: immigration, supply, demand is all being controlled. And, if you ever needed to have yet another belief in who's kind of controlling things here, I mean, look at the pandemic year we had, right? Biggest recession on record and the biggest home price and asset price increase on record, by design. So what are we saying here? I don't know. It's hard to bet against the house in a sense, and pun intended.
Yeah, that was good. That was a good dad joke for not a dad. Yeah, no, I think it's the same old story. It's just a variation of the same old story. I think one thing worth noting, the baby boomer population is certainly going to be retiring in waves and in droves in the next decade, right? So, we're likely going to see immigration numbers that we've probably never seen in this country, or probably close to, just after the post-war kind of sort of numbers. And that might be alarming for some people because, we think that there's a lot of new people coming in here. But do know that a lot of the people that come here, and Dan and I deal with a lot of them, they are very highly educated technical specialists. They work in tech. They work in healthcare. These are people that our economy needs, right? It's not bad that they're coming. It's good. And I think that that's really worth noting. Because it's not like it's not like down south where we have a bunch of illegal immigrants jumping the line causing issues, right? These are people that are coming to contribute to our economy and coming to contribute as positive people in our society. So definitely worth noting there.
Great way to wrap it up there, Ryan. Thanks everyone so much as always for listening and watching. And if you're enjoying this, please give us a subscribe. We release this data every week for you, and happy to keep doing it. So see you next week.
Okay.